a lot, right, Leslie?
Yes, and especially if you're coming from far away.
Right. And I came from Pasadena. You weren't quite as far, but still. Well, so good to be with all of you, and I am just so excited for my friend Leslie, whose second book has just come out, and I had the fortunate opportunity of getting to know her when her first book came out a few years ago. And so if you haven't heard of her first book, you'll definitely want to get this after Happily Ever After. I always get this title wrong. I know. But it's so great. And then with the second book, The Stories We Cannot Tell. And I have been talking about it on my Instagram a lot, and I've been getting, I'm sure you've been getting plenty more messages than me, but The Stories We Cannot Tell. It's such a great title. And everybody, whether it's in relation to the topic of this book or not, so many people are saying, I love that title. What could it possibly be? Because everybody, all of us have stories we cannot tell, right?
And I had the title before I actually wrote the book. The title came to me when I thought of what the story was going to be. So I wrote down the title before I ever even started the outline of the book.
Knowing that this was the book that you were going to write and have this topic. How did the title come to you?
Well, I think because of the subject matter of the book and about women's issues, and there's so many issues that women have, especially surrounding pregnancy, that they don't talk about. And they have shame or embarrassment about things that have happened in their lives when they were trying to get pregnant. So The Stories We Cannot Tell came to me as the title of something that people aren't talking about. The stories that we can keep inside of us. And the stories that we don't share with other people unless they come to us first. And then we might open up, or if we're comfortable, we might open up to somebody. So that's where the title came from.
You had your own journey with, probably many of us in the room have had that journey of wanting kids or maybe not wanting kids. And it's so true. Those are, once we have kids, we don't talk about, and many of us even forget about what happened before those kids ever came. Would you like to share a little bit about your own journey with fertility and infertility?
I went through certain things a long time ago. I have two boys. They're 24 and 26 now. But when I went to try to get pregnant, everybody was asking me, because I got married young, so everybody would say, when are you going to have babies? When are you going to have babies? Which is the worst question to ask anybody, because a lot of people don't want to have kids. And so it's such an intrusive question. And people don't even ask men that question either. And so when I went to have kids, it wasn't an easy process. I didn't get pregnant right away. When I did get pregnant, I had a miscarriage. Then I got pregnant again, had another miscarriage, had a third miscarriage, and finally got pregnant. And my first pregnancy did not go the way I wanted it to go. And we found out coming into the second trimester that the baby wasn't going to live. And so it was very traumatic. I mean, it's been a long time. At the time, I exchanged emails with this woman because the internet didn't really exist at that time, not the way it does now. And so you couldn't just go on and find a Facebook group and talk to people and get support. So there was an organization called Resolve. And I went to them, and they paired me up with this woman who had gone through the same kinds of things that I had gone through. And we started emailing back and forth. And I don't know why I did this, but I saved all the emails I wrote. So I had this was when I had my first baby, my first son. And so I had all the feelings and all the anxiety and everything I went through for the entire pregnancy. So, and it's been 27 years since I went through everything. So I went back, and during COVID, I just decided that there were so many stories. I had friends that also had, problems with pregnancies or had to terminate a pregnancy because the baby had Down syndrome or whatever it was. And so during COVID, I decided I wanted to write these stories of two women who had gone through this and who bond over it. And so that's what I did. And I ended up just going back through and reading all my emails. And so I could get in touch with those feelings that I had. and it was long enough past it that it was not an issue for me at all. But the book, I didn't want it to be a downer either. And I wrote television comedies years ago. So everything I write has humor in it. So it's not like people hear the subject and they think, oh, this is a heavy book. It has some heavy scenes, but I don't think in general it's a totally heavy book because there's a love story and there's essentially a lot of happiness in it too, a lot of hope. So that's really why I wrote it.
And well, I'm sure going through all of those emails and remembering, what it was like, what life was like for you before having kids and wanting these kids. But then, as you were writing the book and as you were extrapolating what would be in the book and what you would leave out because you only have so many pages, what was the thing that you kept coming back to, like in order to pare down and in order to stay focused in this book? So, what was there a specific line that you kept saying to yourself, like, this is what I want the reader to get? What was that thing?
When I wrote it, it was an easy write because my first book took a long time. As my writing coach knows, it took me a long time to do it and to get into it. This book was way easier. I did the outline, the book was done within a year. And because I knew that one of the main things I wanted to write about, it's not a political book at any point, and it's just about being compassionate. And it really shows two sides of the story. One woman's Jewish, one woman's Catholic, so they go through it together, but it's different ways. And I just wanted people to take from it that to have compassion for what two sides of any story, what those sides are. It doesn't matter where you fall on that continuum. It's just about having the compassion for somebody else who, may be going through something that people would say, I will never do this, but they don't know unless they're in those shoes. So I really just wanted a book that showed that and showed the emotional side of whether it's miscarriage or infertility, what anyone goes through. And sometimes, somebody doesn't want to be pregnant and they get pregnant and what that's like too.
In your journey, did you have that friend that that was by your side who helped you through that? Or was this more a book of that perfect friend who you would have had if you could have?
It's more that. It's more the second. I had my husband who was totally great by my side, was going through everything also. But I didn't have that one friend because it seemed like all my friends who were trying to have babies were just having babies,
Because you don't hear the other side.
You don't. And the other friends weren't even married yet because I was very young. So, I was getting my single friends and then my married friends and, some of them would say, I'm going to wait to have kids. And so you just never knew. So I didn't have that one friend like she has, like Katie and Rachel find each other. And I wanted to show that bond between two women and how they both deal with it separately and how one of them is married, so how her husband deals with it, the other one is not married. So it's also about relationships.
And how important they are. And this book is really a reminder, right, to be open and to allow people in, and that when you do that, you can find your greatest friendships, but you have to be vulnerable.
And that's scary, because you never know if somebody's going to judge you or how they're going to take what you say and if they have the same, feelings about certain things. So it's very scary to open up.
And why did you choose to highlight Jewish versus Catholic?
Well, I'm Jewish, and not for this reason, but my husband's Catholic and his family's Catholic. But he calls himself a recovering Catholic because he doesn't believe in it anymore. But he was Catholic and his family's Catholic. And I liked the idea, I don't know, I'm not going to say this is a general term because I don't really know, but all my Jewish friends were all pro-choice. And a lot of the Catholic community is not. So I liked the idea of seeing both sides, how somebody would handle a situation going through it when they were raised Catholic and raised that this is not even something to think about, as opposed to somebody who's Jewish who was raised pro-choice.
And besides the family dynamics between you and your husband, Was there further research that you had to do? Did you go and talk to lots of young moms or women wanting to become moms besides your own experience?
Well, years and years ago, not that much before I went through all this, I volunteered at Planned Parenthood so I could see that side of it. People coming in, some people having abortions, but a lot of what Planned Parenthood does is nothing to do with abortion. And I then moved to corporate offices, which were around here somewhere, of Planned Parenthood. And I also had a ton of friends that were trying to get pregnant or going through this, and people started to open up. And I had a cousin that went through something similar in this book. So people just started to open up about certain things. But yes, that's really the research I did. I mean, I did a little bit of research just to look at like 2023, if anything's really changed. And being in California, things haven't changed that much. Across the country they have, but not so much in California.
And so while you didn't want it to be a political book, do you feel that some of the feedback has, asked you political questions and how have you handled that, and how does the book support or negate them?
Well, Roe versus Wade was overturned like literally 1 month after I got a publisher for this book. So the publisher wanted to push the book forward to go faster than normal publishing would be. And I was shocked that when Roe was overturned. I did not expect it. I mean, I was just totally blown away. And so a few people, people who have read the book overall have never asked me a political question. And they've never had any of those issues. But some interviewers have asked me like why. There's one line in the book that I put in later that just says, you're in California, so with the Supreme Court decision, you get to make the decision because you're here. But I didn't want to talk about what's going on in other states or anything like that because I didn't want it to be political. I wanted it to be just an emotional journey between us together. So I just tried to stay completely out of the politics of it.
After writing this book, was there something that you learned that you didn't expect to feel or to realize about women, about carrying a child, about wanting a child?
I think mostly from the people that have been contacting me after reading the book, I realized how many women are out there that need to see this kind of thing out there to say, I'm not alone, which is one of the other reasons I wrote it. I wanted to help women not feel shamed by anything that goes on in the country or what they hear. And if they have to go through something like that or through miscarrying, that's not their fault. That these things just happen. And, even when I went through miscarriages, I was sure I was doing something wrong. I was positive that it was something I ate or I wasn't doing this right or whatever. And women put a lot on themselves when that happens, which is so unfair, and men don't get that. I mean, if a man went in and said, okay, I'm really upset my wife just had a miscarriage, nobody's going to say, what did you do wrong? Did you eat something that made your wife miscarry? I mean, it's very unfair. But men also go through a lot when any of these stories happen to the wife. And wife, or the partner is holding the baby, so you're bonding with this baby. And so you have these different feelings than your husband does the day the baby's born, of course, they're bonding with the baby. But they still go through so much of what you go through, but they feel like they have to support you because you're the one going through it physically. And so I think a lot of people are seeing that when they read the story. Some people have said, this really affected me and I don't even have kids. And they said, but I could see how this would be a conversation that people should have.
You do touch in the book about how it also affects men. How did you know that because of your own relationship with your husband and that he was able to go vulnerable and share all that when you were both very young, or did that come much later? Like, how did you know how heavy it is for men?
I think my husband went through it too, so I knew that. But I also knew from my friends that their husbands, some of them had like sort of shut their husbands out because they were going through it, and they were like, just go over here and you can grieve over there, but I'm going to grieve over here. And I just kept thinking, if you were married, that is something that everybody's going through together. So I thought I wanted to deal with that and show how she's dealing with the wife and how he's dealing with it.
So great. I love the part about you writing in the character that you wished you could have for yourself, and just really going back to that, because I think as we get older, we realize, right? We realize the friends that we wished we had at different stages in our lives, younger, and then we live, and then we start learning about manifesting and different things, and we start calling in the friendships, the friends that we need to support us through different parts of life. What would you say to the young 20s girl who is at the beginning and deciding for a lot of, for all of us at one point, it was like, do we want kids early or do we want a career first? Like, from your book, somebody who's picking up your book, like, what would you say to that person who is in this great debate about whether they want to have kids now or they want to do a career first, and the friendships they need to support them?
Well, I know because my sons, I've noticed this generation talking to their friends, they all say, a lot of them say, I don't want to have kids.
Yep.
I think they'll change their mind.
All three of my daughters
don't
want to have kids.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart.
I know. And my oldest, when Roe was overturned, the first thing he said was, well, then I'm never having kids because I won't take any chances. I'm like, well, that makes no sense. But anyway, I think, I'm blanking on the question.
What would you say to your son's girlfriend or?
Well, I think it's such a personal issue. And I would say if anybody ever asks you if you're going to have kids, don't answer it. Because first of all, you don't know when I got married at 26. I knew I wanted to have kids my whole life, but I didn't know when. And I didn't want people asking me because there was so much pressure. Even when I wasn't trying to have kids, it felt like pressure. Like, why should I have to have them right now? But I would just say that this generation, because I think of economics and also living in California, that doesn't help. They're scared. They're scared of what's going on in the world and things are changing and how things are. But I still think having kids hopefully will change that, because if you don't have kids, who's going to change the world? Who's going to make these decisions that are better for us? So I would probably just say, don't listen to anybody. Do what you think is right. And if you have a partner, discuss it with a partner. Don't discuss it with anybody else. Yeah.
Well, Rachel and Katie, your characters in the book, if you could meet them, what would your question be to one or both of them?
What would my question be? I think it's more than a question. I think I would just say it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to get through it. As horrible as anything is at that moment, you will move on from it. And you will get through it. Yes. Because we all get through everything. Eventually, even if it doesn't feel like you will at the moment.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And to everybody on the way, find the friend that you can be vulnerable with.
Yeah. And I wanted to write about friendships. Because my last book she had the best friend. But I just think women friendships are amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think that, if you have that friend that you can rely on, or you can just call up and vent to, and I think, especially as you get even older, I think friendships are just so important, because when you're young, you're in high school and your friends kind of come and go, or college friends, and you keep some of them. But we were talking about this over dinner. When you find those people that you just bond with immediately, and you just know, you don't know why, but you just know that person's going to be in your life, I think you hold on to that. Because it's really important.
Yeah. But as you say, it is so important to be open and to be vulnerable and to allow yourself to share your story first, so that the other person feels safe to share their story.
Yeah, because you'd be surprised. I mean, I've heard things from people and I'm like, oh my God, me too. And they're like, really? And they're shocked. But I didn't want to share it first because I didn't know if I'd be judged. But then when they share it, I'm like, yes. And then you just open up and the friendships change too.
Yes.
When you're vulnerable.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what your book really hits home at is like, don't worry about being judged. We're all going through something. And it's probably even bigger than what you think you're going to.
We judge ourselves more than most people judge ourselves.
Yes.
They judge us anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I try to always remind my kids. Like, you think they're looking at you, but they're looking at themselves.
Yes.
The way you're looking at yourself.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yes. Oh, it's so tough to be a woman, isn't it? The job we've been given.
That's true.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing a book so
you
deeply
so much.
from your heart and with your own experience. I mean, this is what I love about authors. I'm fascinated by the time that you take and the focus that you have to write a book, but it's always amazing to me to learn about the seeds that were planted in your personal life to bring you to do this.
And this one's my heart. I love this book, the first one, but this one's like my heart.
Well, and that's what's interesting to me too, is that you're not the first author who has written the most heartfelt book later.
Yeah.
Not first. Why do you think that is?
Well, I wasn't ready. First of all, when I wrote this, I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm really happy with this. This one's about a woman in midlife whose daughter's about to go away to college. Her husband's going through something. And her parents, she's in the sandwich generation, and her parents are also aging, and her father has some issues. And she wants to rediscover herself in the second part of her life. And that was when I wrote that, I had a lot of friends going through that whose kids were leaving and they didn't know what they wanted to do with the rest of their life in their second chapter. So that was really fun. But this one, just because it was like, I knew it was inside of me for so long and I did not want to write a memoir. I knew that one would, be like my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you wanted to get it all, you wanted to have
This
a
was
guinea
fun,
pig
right?
first. Well, you did it.
Thank you.
So good.
Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
Go, Linda.
What's the next book?
That's what I was gonna ask.
I did start another book,
I knew it.
but as soon as this one started to come out, I was like, oh my God, the promotion and the stuff I've been doing for that one but yes, I have 50 pages or something of another book. And it's totally different.
I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, totally different.
Great.
But is it about women and female relationships or
Yes.
female issues?
Yes. It's less about issues and more about it's about three sisters and their mom, and they kind of discover that they don't know who they are and they don't know who their mother is. And it's kind of like a mystery. It's not a mystery, but it's kind of a mystery to kind of figure out who they really are and who their mother really is. And there's a bunch of stuff that happens.
And you are one of three sisters.
I was going to say
that. I purposely made sure not one of those women are me, my sisters, nothing.
Of course not.
No, they really are. They're very different. There's a couple of fights we had in there, that I threw in with the characters and the dialogue, a couple of fights we had as kids. But other than that, no. It's totally different. It's not my mom either.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's exciting.
Because these women aren't me.
But people will assume that they are you guys and they'll try to figure out which parts are
these
you
women are
guys.
so different that anybody who knows my sisters would be like, that's none of you guys. Their lives are completely different. They're so different. So I don't think so.
Well, it'll be interesting to see which one people think that you are, right?
Of those sisters? I don't know which one I am.
Well, you don't know yet.
I'd be the middle one because I'm the middle child, so I'd have to be the middle one.
Well, we'll see. Any other questions?
You say it's not a political book, but I want to just throw out there, I'm commending you for writing about miscarriages because it's a very political issue. They want to say certain things politically, but women don't get condolence cards for miscarriages. I mean, now they're actually persecuting and prosecuting them.
Yeah.
So spotlighting the vulnerabilities that surround that and the swirl of emotions is political by the way that the personal is political, without ever having to say it's political.
Right.
And if we as a culture looked at these women's issues, analogous to when you say we're young, when you started having kids, that's like soldiers who go off to war and they forfeit their bodies. You put your body on the line to give life. How we as a culture respond to that and how dismissive or arrogant men who are ruling the culture are about that is a political issue for women. So just even spotlighting it, especially from both sides, I haven't read the book, but that is a really key thing that women have to start doing because we are under attack. And if we don't start, war buddy friends, that's a story that every man relates to. If we can make men see it, that that's the same, maybe they will have empathy for us and stop casting us in the role of victim, villain, aggressor, all these other things just because we're facing our biological challenges like any other soldier.
That's a good point, because I know in some places a D&C, which if you have a miscarriage, you have to go, not everybody, but you usually go through a D&C. And that means you just go into the doctor's office or hospital or whatever they do, outpatient, and they basically just scrape off your uterus to clean it out. And they are saying now that that's an abortion, even though you already
It's a
miscarried.
medical procedure that's subsequent to a traumatic event against your will.
Right.
And again, until they're sending condolence cards to every woman who has a miscarriage, they're not saying they give a thing about a woman's, giving birth, not giving birth. Because if you want that fetus, it is a child. If you do not want that fetus, it's a parasite.
Yeah.
But that's a personal experience of a political reality now. But the biological reality precedes all politics.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And with miscarriages, most miscarriages happen before the 10th week, 11th week, whatever
Exactly.
it is.
They're right in the purview.
Exactly. So to say that that's an abortion is such a...
It's a criminal thing against the woman. It's a scandalizing. It's
as if you did something
as if
to
you did
cause
something.
that.
And
Yes.
as you pointed out earlier, women are already scourging themselves for all those mistakes, whatever it is. Did they take this medicine? Well, they gave women thalidomide when they were pregnant. So where's the medical, community standing up to say mistakes have been made, women have paid the price for it? How do we advocate? They're not doing it.
Right.
So, even just bringing up miscarriage is a political act of revolution. So go you.
Yeah, no. No, I know exactly what you're saying. And when I originally wrote it, because like I said, Roe wasn't overturned, I
Right.
never really thought about it because this miscarriages were just miscarriages. They were horrible and people still grieve.
They weren't criminalizing them yet.
They weren't criminalizing them. Yeah, so it's taken on a different look
Yes.
now
Yes.
than it did, especially in other states. But yes, and then
Yes.
doctors that are, what are they supposed to do? Not perform them? You could then get
Women will get
infection.
They will get septic.
Yeah, they will.
They will
Mm.
die. It's literally sentencing women to
Yes.
death by denying them necessary health care. And
Exactly.
it's not discussed because women were raised, we aren't supposed to discuss our period. We aren't supposed, the most embarrassing thing is you bled on your chair in school. Really? Because that blood shed makes life exist. We make a lot of bloodshed all around the world for war that's bullshit. And we're supposed to be embarrassed that we bleed to give life? No, wrong. We need to correct it. And books like yours, the subject matter being brought to the foreground helps make that
Thank you.
clarity.
Thank you.
And we
I
need it
appreciate that.
desperately. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the stuff that's going on in some of these states with some of these doctors, or not doctors, I'm sorry, the politicians and the women. And I kept saying, like, if it was a situation where the government was saying, okay, we're going to have to castrate men, it wouldn't happen.
It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen.
And women couldn't vote for it.
I
We
mean,
didn't get to vote.
No.
And 69% of the country
That's right.
is pro-choice.
That's right.
But
And the political servants are literally defying our will. And we as women who contribute to the tax base and are not represented are the same victims as the American citizens who were fighting the American Revolution, because we're being taxed for that representation.
that's true. Yeah, it's really not fair.
What was your most, was there any feedback from fans where it stuck with you or touched your heart in some way?
Oh, so
Because
many
you are
have
trying to write that
already,
about
yeah.
people's stories. Right?
So many of the reviews that are already coming in have just said to me things like, one woman said, "Oh my God, this was my story," and she said, "Thank you for telling it." Some people have just said, I was afraid to read it because it seemed like it might be a heavy, book. But once I read it, I had so much compassion for these two women, and I didn't think it was as heavy as I expected, because of course there's heavy scenes, but it's not like that. The reviews have been just made me feel so good. Like, okay, I did something that is out there. That's why I want to get it out there as much as possible, because I think that there are women out there that shouldn't read it. I had somebody say to me, "I really want to read your book, but I have a Down syndrome child and I'm afraid it'll trigger me." I'm like, totally get it. Don't read the book. Yes.
Just want to give it another perspective. I'm from Norway, part of the Scandinavian countries. I used to live here in LA several years ago. And in Norway and Sweden and Denmark, it's been free choice for X amount of years. So we have a welfare state. So if ever you need help, you will get that. It's paid by the tax. And I'm a bit puzzled because being from a Scandinavian country, but having spent, I suppose, back and forth 20 years in LA, I'm just observing and watching, because to us it seems so surreal that you have to go through this.
It's surreal.
Yeah.
It's bringing back, I don't know, I'm 51. My mom, she was part of the, I suppose, 68 generation and was out there barricading in Australia, etc. And we, Norwegian women and Scandinavian women, we are watching what's going on in America right now in terms of would you want your daughter to be a college student here and fall in love with an American guy? And I'm sorry, I don't want to see.
No.
No, what you're saying is
You're right.
accurate.
No, I love this.
Yeah.
I love the perspective.
Yes.
But we are really watching and thinking. I mean, I'm too old for a kid anyway, so I tried. But
Canada's
but
saying
we're
the same
thinking
thing.
ahead. What will happen now politically in America? We come here for work or for holiday, etc.
Yes.
But things are regressing.
And
That's
that's
the
why this,
Ayatollah Khomeini took
Crazy.
over. I mean, when you look at what happened in Iran, it happened overnight there. Women were wearing miniskirts and getting degrees, and then the Ayatollah came down, and it's fanaticism.
So I just want to give that perspective
no,
that
that's a great
we are paying
perspective.
attention.
Thank you. Yes,
I
thank
know.
you. We're
I
moving
did-
to Norway next week.
Yeah,
by the way.
exactly.
Yeah.
I did a radio show on a Canadian station, and it's the same thing in Canada. They're watching us and they don't understand it. They're just shocked by what's going on in the United
It's shocking.
States. Yeah,
Shocking.
it is. I think it's really shocking.
Shocking.
Yes.
Okay, on this discussion, I don't know if you were aware, for example, that miscarriage in El Salvador triggers an automatic criminal investigation.
Oh wow.
Like 3 countries down.
Wow.
It started like last year. But my question is, in the technicalities of writing a book, you have 2 women. So who is the protagonist, who is the antagonist, and how did you go about the character development as to who is the protagonist, the antagonist, and the balance between the two?
Right. Well, the protagonists, they're really 2. They're both, because the book goes, at the beginning, the book goes back and forth between each one of them's perspective. Because they don't meet until, I don't remember what page, but they meet in a support group. And that's the first time, and then it takes them both. But I still go every other chapter from one of their points of view, even if they're together. So that's kind of how it worked through the whole thing. So there's really 2 protagonists. The antagonist, it depends on when. I mean, sometimes the married woman's fighting with her husband, but he's not really the antagonist. I think the antagonist is really the idea, the subject, yes.
Yeah.
The subject matter and
Yeah.
how that affects them is really the antagonist.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how they view it.
And isn't that more a woman's hero journey anyway? Because for a man, they create the conflict, they know they're pursuing it. Women were like presented with these circumstances that were just trying to like survive.
Right.
And then we have to get brave and get tough. And that's a woman's hero's journey, so it's the outside.
Right.
That is the antagonist.
And sometimes it's inside.
And the inside, the
what's
outside is
going on.
inside.
Right,
Yes.
so it goes on inside you is the antagonist
Yes.
in the story.
Yes.
Yeah, and in my first book, it's really like that. It's when
Yeah.
she's going through and thinking, herself, and that's kind of the antagonist in the first book. I like to write about women's issues and just various things that women are going through at different stages. Any other questions? Yes.
How hard is it for you to detach once you've completed a book? Because you've been so engrossed in it for so long that your brain needs to take a breather.
When I finished the first book, I had no idea at first what I was going to write. I really didn't. So I took like 6 months and just didn't think about anything. And then this book just came to me. When I finished this book, I took another 6 months. I really had no idea. And then saw this news story and went, oh, that sounds like something that I could use to kind of turn into a story. So I would say even now, there are times when I'm interviewed about this book and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to remember these characters, so I have to think, no, it's just this book. And since I'm now writing the third book, sometimes I do that too. Like if I'm talking to somebody and I'm thinking okay, wait, which characters are those? And that's this other book. So sometimes it's hard to detach, but try.
Have you considered developing it into a series? There are so few
This
things
one?
about female friendship on television. You mentioned you were comedy for TV.
Yeah, I once the strike is over, I talk to some people. Yeah, right now, I'm in the Writers Guild, so I'm on strike too, but so it's like, and my family's on strike. So nobody will talk to anybody right now.
Right.
But yes, I would love for this to be like a movie. Like I don't mean a movie in the theater, I mean like a Netflix movie or something like that. If it happens. Great.
Oh, sunshine.
That would be better. Yes. If you could get to them. Because I can't. But yeah,
Yeah, right.
I know.
You can manifest it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I could just
a
say Reese's gonna walk in the
portal.
door right now.
Julie will do it for you.
Yes, Julie.
There are a lot of manifesting queens.
Do you know Reese Witherspoon?
Well, she lives nearby, doesn't she? Somebody here probably
I
does.
don't know where I thought she's in Nashville.
Raise your hand if you're.
No,
She lives Draper James in Nashville. She's. I'm sure.
Yeah, she might be.
Let me
because
call
her
her.
husband her husband or ex-husband now was a huge agent.
Exactly.
So yeah, she might be here. I know Hello Sunshine is here somewhere, so
Yeah, exactly.
but that would be great.
I think they need your help.
I would love that.
Yeah, it'll say Reese's Book Club. Right
Yeah,
there.
I should see it.
So make a sticker. They must have some blank stickers over there.
Yeah, I'll just put one on and tell everybody this is from Reese.
That's right.
And they'll do
There
it
you
for you.
Yeah, okay. Do you have anything for Reese? You do? Oh, that's so funny. Put it
Yeah,
on that one.
I bet you she's been in here.
Has she been in there?
Tell you.
Spread this.
Zibby probably knows her. Zibby knows everybody.
Exactly.
Katie Couric.
There you go. Thank you all
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Leslie. We'll all be back when you and
Sorry.
put your deal together and go on television. You can't wait.